In Montreal in the early 1950s, a university started paying students $20 a day to do nothing. Not light work, nothing. Lie on a bed in a small room, stay there, and get paid several times what a day of real labor was worth at the time. Students signed up quickly, and most of them arrived planning to use the time to think through their coursework. Almost none of them made it past the third day. One walked out and took a manual labor job instead, for roughly a third of the money which he preferred. By the time they left, a number of them were seeing things that were not in the room, in daylight, while fully awake and entirely sober. The official explanation, when this eventually reached the newspapers, was that the researchers were studying how people cope with boring and monotonous work. That was not what they were studying, and the people funding it were not a university. The setup itself was simple. A volunteer lay on a bed wearing translucent goggles, the kind that let light through but carry no shape or edge, so the eyes stayed open and working with nothing to resolve. Cardboard cuffs ran from the elbows out past the fingertips, which made it impossible to touch anything at all, including himself. Sound was handled by leaving a fan running continuously, and even mechanical hum covering anything that might otherwise have come through the walls. Meals were brought in. There was a bathroom. Nobody was restrained, and nobody was locked in, and any volunteer could end his run at any moment simply by saying that he wanted out. So this was not darkness, and it was not silence. There was light, sound, and temperature in that room the entire time, which is worth being exact about, because the thing that had been removed was not stimulation. It was change. Every input stayed identical for as long as the person stayed in there. No shadow moved. No sound rose or fell. Nothing arrived that had not already been arriving for hours. That turned out to be the part that mattered. The first hours went the way anyone would expect. Volunteers were bored, then restless, then bored in a different way. Most had planned to use the time productively, working through coursework in their heads or finally thinking out problems they had been putting off, and nearly all of them found within a day that they could no longer hold a thought together long enough to finish it. The mind did not go quiet. It went loose. After that, orientation began to slip. Volunteers lost track of how long they had been in the room, sometimes by many hours in either direction. Some could not say with any confidence where their own limbs were. One reported the clear sensation that his body was occupying two overlapping positions at once, and described it flatly as an observation, rather than as a complaint. Nothing about the experience presented itself to them as alarming while it was happening. Then the visual field started producing content on its own, and it did so in a documented order, moving from simple to complex. First, the darkness behind closed eyes brightened. Then dots of light. Then lines. Then simple geometric shapes, drifting and repeating. Every volunteer in the published run reached at least that stage, and for all of them, it was something they had never experienced before in their lives. None of them had gone looking for it, and none of them could stop it. For most, it kept going. Patterns like wallpaper, tiling across the whole field, then isolated objects hanging with no background behind them at all, and for a few, complete scenes with the logic of a dream, running while they lay there awake. The image that became famous from the paper was a procession of squirrels marching along with sacks over their shoulders, moving with obvious purpose. It is the detail everyone remembers, and it is also the least important thing the study found. The researchers were measuring more than what people saw. Volunteers took cognitive tasks before going in and again on the way out, and the scores fell. Simple arithmetic became difficult. Reasoning problems that had been easy a few days earlier were not easy anymore. The decline was measured rather than reported, which made it much harder to dismiss as nerves or as boredom. Something in the room had been taking pieces out of them while they lay still. Attention came off worse than anything. Volunteers said that concentrating G had started to feel physically unpleasant, and that following a thought in a straight line had become work in a way it never had been. For several of them, the effects were still noticeable after they left the building, which nobody involved had predicted, and which the study had not been designed to follow. There was one more result, much quieter than the squirrels, and considerably more useful to somebody. People who had spent 2 or 3 days in that room became easier to persuade. Positions they would have pushed back on beforehand went in with far less resistance. The isolation had not simply degraded their thinking, it had softened it, and softened it fast enough that a couple of days was sufficient to make the difference visible. The reason any of this happens is not that a brain breaks down when things get quiet. It is closer to the reverse. Your brain does not sit waiting for the world to report in. It runs a continuous model of what is around you, assembled out of memory and expectation, and it uses the signals arriving from your eyes and ears mainly to correct that model wherever it has gone wrong, which makes perception a negotiation between something you are generating and something arriving to check it. Under ordinary conditions, the checking is relentless, happening many times a second, and the generated version never gets the chance to drift far from the room you are actually in. Take the checking away and the generating continues exactly as before, unopposed, with nothing showing up to contradict it. What the volunteers lost was never reality. It was the correction. The clearest evidence for this does not come from any laboratory. It comes from a common condition called Charles Bonnet syndrome, in which people who are losing their eyesight begin seeing detailed and fully formed images that are not in front of them. Faces, repeating patterns, small figures, entire landscapes. It is not connected to any psychiatric illness whatsoever, and it is far more common than most people assume, particularly among the elderly. The people experiencing it are clear-headed and usually understand perfectly well that what they are seeing is not there. It happens because the visual system has stopped receiving correction and carries on generating anyway. Many never mention it to anybody, because of how they expect it to sound. The volunteers in Montreal were going through a temporary, deliberately produced version of the same thing. None of this was paid for by a psychology department. Donald Hebb, who directed the work, received a classified grant from the Canadian Defense Research Board carrying the designation X38 worth $30,000 across 3 years. The early 1950s were the peak of public alarm about brainwashing, driven by claims about what had been done to American prisoners during the Korean War. The proposal Hebb submitted described building a chamber in which a person deprived of ordinary perceptual input would become susceptible to the implantation of new or different ideas. The suggestibility result was not something stumbled across along the way and written up as a curiosity. It was the question the money had been given to answer, written into the proposal before a single volunteer had lain down on a bed. The squirrels were a byproduct. Copies of the findings went to all 3 branches of the United States military and to the Central Intelligence Agency. When reporters began circling the work in early 1954, defense officials publicly characterized it as research into how people respond to monotonous and boring work. The funding was canceled that same year, after the coverage appeared rather than before it, which tells you which of the 2 events the decision was responding to. The findings themselves did not go anywhere. Controlled isolation became part of the interrogation repertoire, and the general conditions those students volunteered for are approximated today in solitary confinement, applied to very large numbers of people, over periods measured in months and years rather than days, with no goggles needed and no research budget attached to any of it. So go back to the offer. The people in that room were healthy adults who had walked in on their own. They were paid well by the standards of the time, they were fed, they had a bathroom, they knew which building they were in, and they believed they knew roughly what was being studied, which was the one thing they were wrong about. Nobody was hurt, threatened, or held anywhere against their will. And it took under 3 days. Under 3 days of unchanging light, unchanging sound, and nothing available to touch, before a young man lying on a bed in Montreal watched a line of squirrels carry sacks across a room that contained no squirrels and understood while it was happening that they were not there. Every one of them had a door. They could sit up, say the word, and be standing outside within a minute, and most of them did exactly that long before the run was scheduled to end. That was the one condition the experiment never varied. Everything built on it afterward was built by people who had read the results carefully and noticed which condition was doing the work.